Once upon a time, in the heart of the Arabian desert, there lived two young souls destined to cross paths and become symbols of eternal love. Layla and Majnun, though separated by social constraints and family pressures, shared a love so pure and intense that it would transcend time, culture, and the boundaries of the world they knew. This is the story of their unshakable devotion to each other, a love story so profound it would endure through centuries. Layla, a woman of extraordinary beauty and intelligence, lived in a prosperous family in a city where wealth, power, and status were paramount. Her charm and grace were known far and wide, and many suitors sought her hand in marriage. But her heart had already been captured by a young poet named Case. Case was not like the other suitors who had eyes for Layla. He was an artist, a lover of words, and his heart and mind were consumed with a passion for poetry and for Layla. From the moment he first laid eyes on her, something inside him stirred, and he poured all his emotions into his verses, speaking of the beauty of the desert, the stars, and most importantly, the love he felt for Layla. Case, who would later become known as Majnun, meaning the madman, would wander the streets, the desert, and the markets of his town, composing verses dedicated to Layla. His love was not the fleeting, superficial affection of the ordinary lover, but a deep, spiritual yearning that seemed to consume him entirely. He would stand under the night sky and write poetry about the moon, seeing it as a metaphor for Layla's beauty, her light in the darkness of his heart. His verses were filled with longing and devotion, capturing the very essence of his soul's unquenchable thirst for her love. Layla, in turn, found solace in Case's poetry. She, too, was captivated by his words, and their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Their love was innocent and pure, like an delicate flower blooming in the harsh desert heat. But their love was not meant to be an easy one. In the world they inhabited, their feelings for each other were considered inappropriate. Layla's family, concerned with their social standing and reputation, could not allow their daughter to marry a poet with no wealth or status. They saw Case not as a worthy suitor but as a dreamer, a man with no material worth to offer. As their love grew deeper, so did the pressure from Layla's family. They arranged for Layla to marry another man, someone they deemed more suitable for her as someone who could offer her security, wealth, and a future. Layla was devastated by this arrangement, but her hands were tied. She was forced to obey her family's wishes and marry a man she did not love, while her heart ached for Case, the man who had become her everything. For Case, the rejection was unbearable. His soul was shattered, and his heart, once full of hope and joy, was now filled with despair. He could not accept the separation from Layla, and in his grief, he wandered the desert, speaking to the winds, the stars, and the earth as if they could hear his sorrow. He became known as Majnun, the madman, because his love for Layla seemed to drive him to the brink of insanity. His madness was not the type that resulted from a broken mind, but the kind that arises from a heart broken by an unfulfilled love, a love that cannot be extinguished despite the pain it causes. Majnun's days were spent in the desert, where he wrote poetry in the sand, reciting verses that spoke of his deep sorrow, his unyielding devotion to Layla, and the unbearable longing he felt for her. His body became thin, his eyes hollow, and his mind increasingly consumed by thoughts of her. The world around him faded, and all that remained was Layla. Her name was on his lips, in his every thought, and in every word he wrote. His poetry became his lifeline, his only way of keeping in touch with the world, even though the world had turned its back on him. Meanwhile, Layla's life was not any easier. Although she was married to another man, her heart never strayed from Case. She lived a life of quiet sorrow, longing for the man she could never have. In public, she was a dutiful wife, but in her private moments, she was a woman trapped in a cage of her own heartache. Her love for Case was a secret, one she could never express, for fear of bringing shame upon her family. But as the years passed, the pain of living without him grew unbearable. Time went on, and the distance between Layla and Majnun only seemed to widen. Yet, their hearts remained bound together by a love so intense that nothing in the world could sever the connection between them. They were not separated by mere distance, but by the forces of fate, social expectations, and the rigid structures of their society. Still, no matter how far apart they were, their love remained a constant, burning brightly like a flame that could never be extinguished. As the years stretched on, Majnun's madness grew. He became more withdrawn, more consumed by his thoughts of Layla. He would speak to the stars, asking them to bring him closer to her, and he would often lose himself in long, rambling conversations with the desert twins. His love was both his greatest source of inspiration and his deepest agony. Yet, despite the toll it took on him, he never once considered abandoning his feelings for Layla. His love was an unwavering force, one that could not be broken by the passage of time or the harshness of the world around him. Layla, too, remained steadfast in her love, but she was a woman caught in a cruel reality. Her marriage to another man, while seemingly fulfilling the social expectations placed upon her, was empty. She could not give her heart to anyone but Case. Her love for him remained the one truth in her life, the one thing that no external force could alter. But she, too, was trapped by the constraints of her society and her family's wishes. It was only when the fates seemed to align that the two lovers were finally able to meet once more. Many years had passed since they had last seen each other, and much had changed in their lives. Majnun had become a shadow of the man he once was, and Layla, though still as beautiful as ever, was a woman burdened by the years of longing and sorrow. Their reunion, however, was not as they had hoped. The barriers that had separated them for so long remained firmly in place. The love that once had seemed so pure and eternal now felt like a cruel joke. They could not embrace, for their love was still forbidden, and the consequences of defying their families and society were too great to ignore. The reunion was bittersweet. There was a brief moment of shared longing, of recognition, but it was overshadowed by the painful realization that they could never be together. They parted once more, each carrying the weight of their unfulfilled love, knowing that their hearts would always remain tied to each other, but that their bodies would never be united. In the end, Layla succumbed to illness, her body worn down by the years of heartache. On her deathbed, she whispered Majnun's name, the name of the one true love of her life. She died with her heart full of love for him, and when Majnun learned of her death, his heart broke in two. He wandered the desert once more, his mind consumed by grief. His love for Layla had been his reason for living, and without her, there was no reason to go on. Majnun died soon after, his body finally giving out under the weight of his sorrow. He was buried near Layla's grave, the two lovers now united in death, as they had been in spirit all along. Their love, which had defied the rules of the world they lived in, had transcended death itself, and their story would live on forever, inspiring poets, artists, and dreamers for generations to come. The story of Layla and Majnun is more than just a tale of lost love. It is a reflection on the power of devotion, the pain of separation, and the enduring nature of true love. It teaches us that love is not bound by time or circumstance, and that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that never come to fruition in this life. It is a reminder that love, when pure and true, can transcend all obstacles, even death itself. The legacy of Layla and Majnun lives on in the hearts of all who have heard their story. Their love is a symbol of the eternal struggle between the heart's desires and the world's expectations, a tale of love that could not be defeated by the harshest of circumstances. It is a reminder that love is both a beautiful and painful thing, and that sometimes the most profound lessons we learn come not from what we have, but from what we yearn for. As we reflect on the tragic beauty of Layla and Majnun's love, we are reminded of the power of the heart, and of the timeless truth that love, in its most pure form, is eternal.